Last week, the BRICS meeting wrapped up, and this was the 15th BRICS meeting that happened in Johannesburg, South Africa, and quite a few interesting things happened. So this is just my quick take. I know that this video is coming out a little bit later, but I wanted to sit on it for a little bit of time, read some of the news, and then come up with some of my thoughts. There are about 3 things that I want to talk about, and then get your opinion, obviously, in the comments. Leave a comment and tell me what you thought was most interesting. Obviously, the first one is the new members. So I won't play the clip because everybody has the president of South Africa in their video saying the 6 members that got accepted. This was actually exactly what I wanted to see. In the last video, I talked about 3 things that I thought would make this a successful BRICS meeting, and one of them was new members. So we know that 6 new members have been accepted. So that is Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Argentina, Egypt, and Ethiopia. So these new members have the opportunity to accept before January 1st. So at the beginning of next year, there will be potentially 6 new members if they all accept. And I assume they will accept because they wanted to, they applied, they were interested in joining, so there's very little reason for them not to join. So the BRICS is going to expand, and so let's talk about those countries. And only 2 of them were a little bit of a surprise for me, and that is Argentina and Ethiopia. The other ones made a lot of sense. So Russia is already a major oil and gas exporter, and they basically just built that block out quite a bit stronger now with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Iran. So those 4 nations now will pretty much be able to handle any energy needs of this new bloc in terms of having a pretty big say in the global energy market. And then also this bloc, this oil bloc, will be able to influence OPEC now a bit more, because it's Saudi Arabia and Russia, and if they work together aiming towards the same goal. In the past, Russia and Saudi Arabia have had different goals and different needs for their energy outputs and for the money that they make off of oil sales. Now with BRICS, they might be more aligned, potentially more aligned, has providing oil and gas to the global south, potentially. That could be where they really want to start focusing. The United States has long said that they want to get off oil and gas and switch to clean energies. They have big, ambitious plans with their climate change agenda. And so it only makes sense that you say, why don't we go where they want our product, which is oil and gas, petroleum, right? And China is still using fossil fuels, petroleum, for most of their energy needs. And that's not going to change anytime soon. So this bloc, this new oil bloc that now includes Russia, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Iran, could potentially change the energy markets moving forward if they choose to work in a more cohesive way outside of OPEC, and essentially influencing OPEC outside of OPEC, if that makes sense. So that's interesting. They also have created a kind of much needed, I guess, money block. It might not be obvious right away, but a liquidity block, specifically with now China, which has large foreign currency reserves, Saudi Arabia, which has large US dollars holdings, basically, and the United Arab Emirates. So that block there is actually quite a rich block in terms of potential to lend US dollars for financing some of the BRICS infrastructure and some of the loans that the BRICS will hopefully put out in the future, right? Offer these loans to the global south, because one of their goals is, with their new development bank, is to have infrastructure projects and to finance things, which a lot of people are saying, if we're going to join this group, we want to benefit from it, and that requires money. And if they haven't decided what they want to do with a BRICS currency, then most of that will still be in US dollar denomination, and you need to have that in order to give those loans. So bringing Saudi Arabia in and bringing the United Arab Emirates in, that brings in liquidity and cash, essentially, to bolster this new development bank. And that might be kind of a step forward to see how that develops, because now they might have more cash to actually give out loans and actually develop projects. So those were not a surprise at all to me. I think a few months back, this was pretty evident that China was going to try to bring in more from the Middle East, because they went there and they brokered that peace deal, tentative peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So I even said that in one of my previous videos, saying, oh, this might be a prerequisite in order for them to join BRICS, which is now what's happened. So I feel I was correct on that, because it did kind of come out of the blue. A lot of people said, what was this deal all about? And I said, well, it's probably for BRICS. So the new members, obviously a big deal. In terms of Egypt, I did a video talking about how African countries love China. Specifically, many of the governments have worked with China to build infrastructure projects, whether it's railroads or some other form of transportation. And one of the things that I mentioned in that video is that basically the new capital that's being built in Egypt is being financed and built in large part by Chinese companies and Chinese funding. So that's not a surprise. Egypt has had a strong relationship with China for a long time, and they've had a strong relationship with Russia. They were even accused recently of trying to sell weapons to Russia. So they have been kind of on the wrong side, so to say, of the Western, U.S.-led coalitions. So it's not surprising for me that Egypt was invited. Argentina, I was looking into it a little bit, and people were saying that, different reports and different people were talking about how Argentina and Brazil actually have a large trading, a lot of trade going on between the two countries, and that could be why they allowed Argentina in. Also, I think they just want to expand into every part of the globe, so to say, and so they wanted some country from South America, and Argentina fit the bill. Ethiopia, maybe you guys know why in the comments. I would love to hear your opinion on that. That one was a real oddball, in my opinion. And again, it's because I just didn't see it on the radar, like with Iran or Saudi Arabia. Those were very much on the radar. Leave a comment if you have some information about Argentina or Ethiopia that you want to share that maybe I just missed, because there's so much news that goes around. I'm assuming it's a lot to do with trade for those two countries. So leave a comment below and let me know. So that was the first one. Obviously, a big deal. Lots of new members. More than doubled the membership with these 6 new nations. And also very promising because it shows that they're willing to let new members in, which, depending on how kind of the West responds to this, if they do respond or don't respond, I'm assuming they'll probably respond in some way, because Western media basically was a blackout. They basically didn't even report on it. And so I could see that the United States tries to retaliate towards these 6 countries in order to deter other nations from trying to join BRICS, right? If there's swift action from the United States and its allies against these nations, it might, deter Mexico from trying to join, because they say, I don't know if I want that, whatever that consequence might be. We might see some kind of financial actions taken against these countries. That'd be the most obvious one. So we'll have to see how that responds, like how that plays out. If there's not a strong reaction from the United States, this is a good sign for other countries that want to join, because the BRICS is obviously open for new memberships, and maybe every year they take in 2 or 3 new members until everybody's joined, or until people don't want to join anymore, which I could see happening, a slow 1 or 2 members every year to slowly build it out over the next 10 to 20 years. The other thing that I said should be talked about, but really wasn't, was the currency. Everybody's been talking about some kind of BRICS currency, And there seems to be kind of two camps. And this plays into kind of the second point. Because they didn't talk about currency, there seemed to be this back and forth between, are we an anti-Western bloc or not? And that is yet to be decided, I feel. China basically came out and said, no, we don't want to be an anti-Western bloc because it doesn't benefit us in any way, because we still do a lot of trade with all these countries that are considered the West. And so we're just a new bloc that is a new option and a new alternative, but we're not anti-Western. As for Russia, seemed to be more like, yes, we are anti-West, because for obvious reasons they want to be anti-West. They are anti-West. So there still seems to be a bit of a split there, and I feel that's going to be one of the bigger issues moving forward for them, is where do they really truly stand? Because if they truly are West, anti-America, then developing a currency becomes more urgent. Having control of that becomes more urgent. If they're willing to work within the frameworks that are set up and use the US dollar for their loans and for other, purposes, right, for trade and for loans, then there won't need to be a massive and quick move on a new currency. And it could even become more like the euro, where it's an alternative currency, but it's not something that's really actively trying to take out the US dollar. So they need to resolve that. What are they? Are they just another block of countries that are willing to work together and allow some more leniency in policy? Because the thing is, with the United States now, it seems like you're either with them or you're against them. And China is more like, we don't want to interfere with your domestic politics or even really care what you're doing in your own country. If you're willing to trade with us and if your money's good, we'll trade with you. And as for with the United States, it's always been, there's been conditions on what you're allowed to do, and if you try and go against the United States, there's consequences. This is why a lot of African countries have struggled to work with the United States, because they are ruled, in essence, by dictators, and although the United States is happy to work with dictators, they're happy to work with them if they don't have any of their own ideas, meaning as long as you do what the United States says, we can work with you. But if you have your own ideas, like Gaddafi trying to create his own currency, or, Saddam Hussein or anybody else who might have their own ideas about how they should run their own country, the United States will replace them very quickly. So China in this new bloc might be more lenient in that sense of, we don't want to interfere with your domestic policies. We're not trying to push democracy or any other ideology on you or your people. As long as your money's good, we'll trade with you. And so that might be what we're seeing develop, and that might be a less of an anti-West sentiment and more just like an alternative. Whereas we haven't, the BRICS hasn't clearly decided what they want to be, in my mind. And they're kind of teetering and tottering back and forth between this idea of anti-West and just, no, we're a new bloc. And so Russia obviously is the biggest voice in saying we want to be anti-West. And I think China and Brazil are more in the middle of no, let's just be a new bloc. So they need to resolve that. And obviously the currency issue wasn't resolved, and there was really not a lot of talk, at least from what I saw, that was really super specific. So that was, in my last video I said if they talk about it and there's real movement, I would say that was a success condition. They failed that one. They passed the new member one, they failed the currency one, in my mind. And the last one that I said is, will there be any deals or any big movements on the sideline? And two things that kind of came from this, and going back to the alternative to the United States, is Saudi Arabia and China and Russia have discussed building nuclear reactors of some sort in Saudi Arabia so that Saudi Arabia could have new energy options. The United States has been against this for a long time because of Israel's objection to it. Again, geopolitics in that area. Israel really doesn't want any of those nations like Iran or Saudi Arabia to develop, or Egypt for that matter, to develop their own enrichment programs, uranium enrichment programs. So they've been against that for a long time, and the United States has supported that. Now, Russia and China, who both countries, they both have nuclear power and nuclear weapons, said that they would be willing to help Saudi Arabia with developing civilian nuclear technology. And that kind of broke around the same time as the BRICS. There might have been a few reports before discussing it, but more have come out since. The other big thing is that China and India, so President Xi and Modi, had a conversation, supposedly, it was reported, about removing some of the troops from the border that is disputed. So there's been a border conflict for years. I think the start of it was like in 1969 or something like that. I'd have to look up the exact date, but it was in the 1960s when the first dispute started, and they've had troops there ever since, and there's scrimmages all the time, and sometimes they flare up, sometimes it's more peaceful. A few years back, or a few months back even, I think last year, so now about a year ago, there were some flare-ups where there were some pretty bad videos coming out, and people were, getting riled up on both sides, saying, down with the other country. And a lot of people have pointed to these disputes, saying that the BRICS is not strong because the nations can't even get along. So there's some movement on that, which is positive. So I would say overall this meeting has been a success. It hit 2 of my 3 conditions that I thought would be a good direction for the BRICS. Of course, I'm nobody, so it doesn't matter what I think. But in terms of how does this look to the global population, to other countries, I feel like this was a successful meeting. 2 of the main things that needed to be discussed were. The third one, obviously the currency is a bigger issue, and if you're bringing in new members, they might want to have a say in that. So that might be tabled until a future meeting, maybe next year's meeting, or until there's some kind of catalyst that makes it really worthwhile to discuss that. What did you guys think of the meetings and of these kind of 3 things that came out of it or didn't come out of it? And what do you think about overall? How do you feel? Do you feel like it's going to become stronger? Or do you think that adding new members might actually cause chaos, and that these members are all spread out around the globe, and that there's not enough, again, which is the big criticism, not enough cohesion, and not enough cohesion in what each member wants and what they hope to achieve in the future? Leave a comment below, because this is obviously the biggest criticism as the bloc moves forward, is that they can't get along and that there's no real guiding principle, and therefore it's destined to fail. I don't believe that. I think people from different backgrounds and countries from different ideologies can work together. We've seen it throughout history. It just depends on if what they're working for benefits all of them. And so that is what we need to see. What are the goals moving forward? What are the real goals of BRICS? And will they somehow be able to bring everybody on board with those same goals? Because again, if it's not an anti-West, down with the established global policies to develop new ones, then kind of what is the value of being part of BRICS, especially if it risks annoying the current establishment, and if it risks the United States potentially retaliating against you if you join BRICS. So that's kind of an interesting concept to think about, and if you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment below. And if you want to see the video where I talked about what China's doing in Egypt in relationship to what they're building, you can click here and check out that video. It's actually interesting to see all the projects that China has been doing in Africa over the last couple of decades. So check that one out, and I will see you over there.